Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Game series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we are taking a look at a game from chess.com's Computer Chess Championship, the Rapid event, and this is a fantastic game between RubiChess and Torch. So let's have a look. Ruby is white, Torch is black. Let's see how it all came about. So we got a slightly offbeat Sicilian with 2a6. In England, known as the specialty of Michael Franklin, who unfortunately died recently. Lovely old gentleman, always played the 2a6 Sicilian. Is rated around 2200, 2300. Strong player, tough, and never apparently kept a single one of his score sheets. So yeah, I don't know. Somehow a 70, 80 year career in chess is just gone somehow now that he's gone. Find that quite amazing as well. But anyway, this was his speciality, and he scored very well with it. So c3 played, and now black could do several things. I think Michael always played d5 actually in this position, transposing to some sort of c3 Sicilian. But the TCC book is to play d6 and knight d7, and this basically, you know, gives white everything he could want really from the opening. A nice double pawn center, easy development. I mean, it's not lost for black or anything, but white's just got a very nice position. Queen c7, castles, knight f6, knight d2, e5. I'm not quite sure when the book ended. It was either on the next move or the move after that. So a4 played, and what is white doing here? Just restricting black from playing b5. Obviously, when you've played the pawn to c5 like this, it's really nice to play the pawn to b5 as well. Have the two pawns together. They can support each other if they need to advance. In particular, the advance c4 in this sort of Lopez type position is quite tempting. So a4 restricts that. Bishop e7 played. And now d5 from Ruby. Actually, if you put this on Stockfish, Stockfish wants to just play b3, stop c4, that's going to come in next, and just play the bishop to b2, and then later play maybe something like d5, or maybe just keep the central tension. But d5 is a very sensible move, and well, I mean, white's just really threatening to get a complete bind on the queen side here. So c4 played. Very interesting move. The idea is that if you take on c4, then black's going to take on e4. Give up a c pawn for an e pawn. In principle, not bad. But yeah, well, as you're going to see, you know, whenever black plays this sort of thing from a slightly worse position, well, he's always going to have a few little fraught things to navigate. And in particular, well, what we're going to see is that white gets some very quick pressure and a very quick bind on the black queen side. Ruby did it slightly differently. Played bishop e2, and after rook b8, looking for b5 to support the pawn on c4. Now Ruby took on c4, and after knight takes e4, then a5. And this is rather irritating for black. I mean, what black would really want to do here is to play the move b5. Unfortunately, a takes b6, knight b6, knight b6. Is rather annoying because we've got queen a4 check, forking the king and the knight on e4. Quite unusual. Well, you see this tactic from time to time, but quite an unusual setting in this way. So that means that black cannot free the queen side for now, and that means that white is going to play the move bishop e3 and clamp down on the b5 break. And what does that mean? Well, I mean, it means really that this bishop is going to find it hard to get developed, and if that bishop finds it hard to get developed, the rook as well. So black's got to watch out here. Its queenside pieces could end up getting rather squeezed. The one good thing that black's got going for it is that obviously the pawn on e4 is gone, which means that black has got some space on the king side, and Torch immediately activates that king side majority with f5. Bishop e3. Clamping down on b5, and now castles. Yeah, I mean, I did vaguely wonder about f4, but what you do, you just go bishop a7, rook a8, and bishop b6. And yeah, this is rather unpleasant, because if you take on here, I go knight b6, hitting the rook on a8, and I think you've probably guessed it, after rook b8, we've got queen a4 check again, forking these two. So black would be forced after bishop b6 to play queen b8, which I don't think can be the purpose of life, really. So castles from Torch, just getting out of that. And now queen c2 played. Yeah, I mean, queen c2 was the main move. It was what Ruby played, also what Stockfish was playing all the time. I think Dragon was looking at quite an interesting idea, which was to go rook c1. With the idea just of going b4 here and activating that queenside majority. Of course, you know, White's got these 4 pawns against these 3. And, well, because you've got this pawn on a5 clamping down on the b6 pawn, it means that c4 to c5 would be possible to achieve. You often see this structure in the Najdorf. So, yeah, one typical game was queen d8, b4, queen e8, Stockfish bringing the queen around to the kingside. Bishop b6, looking for something like bishop c7. So takes, bishop d8, and now c4. And yeah, I mean, c5's coming in quickly. It's a very interesting plan. What Stockfish did was quite incredible here. He took, and then played the move a5, which I had not seen coming at all. But the idea is after ba, we go knight c5, knight d2, and bishop d7. And you can't get rid of this knight because I've got bishop a4 pinning. And, well, this knight's very well entrenched, and we're just going to go, well, either after this pawn on a5, or we're going to start moving these pawns forward with counterplay. Very, very interesting idea there from Stockfish, and Stockfish managed to, yeah, managed to get a pretty good position. This was how the game continued. f4, queen g6, f3, bishop h3, and you can tell that things are, yeah, you know, black's got quite a lot of nice counterplay here. So that was quite extraordinary, but a very interesting plan from Dragon again. But queen c2 is interesting because it sort of really stymies this black kingside advance. Yeah, you know, you can't play f4 because the knight is hanging, and if you go back to f6, well, I mean, f5 is hanging, but also, you know, there's moves like knight g5 followed by knight e6. So yeah, I mean, black's really, you know, black's got this central pawn, but that hasn't really solved the problems of space in the black position. This whole queenside bind is very, very annoying. So king h8 played by Torch. Rook ad1 from Ruby, just protecting that d5 pawn. So now if ever you try and bring a knight back, the pawn on d5 is defended. And now a few ideas. I mean, as we saw earlier, Stockfish liked the move queen d8, just to bring the queen over to the kingside. What was happening here? King h1, queen e8, knight g1 was this was Dragon against Stockfish, I think, wasn't it? Yeah. h6, knight h3, g5, f3, knight ef6, knight f2, which was a pretty unusual way of getting the knight there, but quite a nice idea, really. I mean, this pawn f5 is weak. And well, this knight is sort of covering stuff. So if you go to g4, then the knight will be able to come into e4, and it's also stopping g4. Stockfish came up with something quite amazing. Again, just a b5 break like this, queen f7, just preparing to line up against this pawn on d5. I suppose the only drawback that really to this knight on c4 is that you can't play c4. And well, yeah, I mean, queen f5, knight takes b6, knight takes d5 was played, and well, materials equal, and black's managed to get itself a little bit freed. This knight is still rather awkward attacking this pawn on d6, but yeah, somehow Stockfish managed to sort of survive this position as black. Quite interesting. What Torch did was very aggressive, though. Just g5, in we go, and yeah, what's the idea? I mean, you're looking to go g4 basically, you know, and you're going to try and get your knight out like this, maybe the bishop back, and then the queen can move over to g7, and we've got some sort of ready-made attack brewing. So very aggressive play from Torch. But Ruby wasn't having any of it. Now, I mean, Stockfish was playing g3 in this position, g4, knight fd2, knight g5, and then playing this move f4. Quite sharp, you know, but yeah, I mean, again, white's better, but it wasn't you know, totally clear. What Ruby does was amazing. I was watching this game live, actually, or you know, I sort of came across it whilst just taking a quick look at the chess.com website, and well, I was pretty shocked by this move, g4. G4, wow. I mean, in some ways very positionally sound and quite familiar. You know, you again in King's Indians, you're often playing this move G4 to try and undermine this F5 pawn and get control of the central and kingside dark squares. But yeah, to do it with a king on G1 like this, very, very scary. But yeah, I mean, it gives black a pretty awkward dilemma, really. And what Torch came up with, I didn't see anything coming from now on, to be honest. It was just a total mystery, I have to say. So bishop d8 played, first of all. Just giving the queen a little bit of a possibility to transfer to the king side. And now knight e1 from Ruby. What's the idea of knight e1? White wants to play rather f3 and chase away this knight on e4 and then be able to take the pawn on f5 safely. So yeah, I mean, I was thinking of knight df6, but we can do something like, for example, f3, knight c5 and b4, and actually this knight is really embarrassed. Yeah, you don't want to start going, you know, out there really. I mean, you know, f5 is hanging. We've got moves like bishop a7, bishop b6. You know, it's really very, very unpleasant, this. So yeah, I mean, you want to be able to come back with this knight to f6. And that's exactly what Torch did in this position. Knight ef6. I was not expecting that. Now, of course, the idea is that queen f5. We've got, you know, discovered attacks. Knight takes d5, attacking the queen. Also, maybe got some knight c5s at some stage, and the pawn on g4 is hanging behind it. So white plays g takes f5, and now, I mean, really, I just wasn't spotting any of these ideas, but I don't think it's particularly, yeah, I don't feel particularly ashamed about it. This is real space age chess. Now, what Stockfish did in this position was to go knight g8, which also surprised me completely. The idea is that black wants to just go knight h6 and then grab this pawn. So knight f3, we go knight h6. King h1, knight c5, yeah, we're ready to come out with a bishop on f5. So white's got this move knight h4, takes bishop h6, bishop f5, little intermezzo, and queen d2. And yeah, I mean, Stockfish was holding this, but it's not pleasant, to be honest. I mean, the rook's coming into g1, we come with the queen on e3. You know, we've got moves like b4 coming in, this king is weak. You know, I really don't like this for black, I have to say. Okay, Stockfish held it fine, but I didn't like it. Dragon did knight e8, which I was sort of assuming was going to be, you know, something similar. Maybe instead of going knight g8 to f6, you want to go knight e8 round to g7, for example. But it's a bit more than this, because after knight f3, Torch's idea was the absolutely amazing b5. b5, that is the move that you weren't able to play because white had clamped down with the knight, the bishop and the pawn. So Ruby took on b6, and now Torch just played knight takes b6. And I was watching this, as I said, watching it unfold live in front of me, and I was saying, what? You know, like we're just losing material here, right? And I was trying to work out why we weren't, and I couldn't. And well, it's absolutely true. We are losing material. Bishop takes b6 here. Rook takes b6, knight takes b6, and now this move bishop takes f5. So there's a little bit of an intermezzo here, the bishop attacking the queen. But well, it looks like there's quite a strong move, bishop d3 here, because after all, you know, we're attacking the bishop on f5, and if you take on d3, well, I take with the queen like this, and well, I've got rid of black's control of the light squares. I mean, you take on here, I've got, I don't know, something like knight d2. I get my knight into e4. I mean, this is just totally, you know, this is complete control basically. But Torch's idea was incredible actually. It's to go bishop h3, and well, we've got three pieces hanging now. We've got the knight on b6, we've got the knight on f3, and we've also got the rook on f1, and yeah, I mean, this is kind of dangerous, right? I mean, because, you know, you could go, if you play a move like rook e1, I can take on f3. And, well, I mean, this king's not particularly great. And we've got ideas like, you know, bringing the bishop round to b6 to attack f2. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces hanging here. So what Ruby did was a little bit desperado, just trying to break up the black position, which is quite solid at the moment, and just give black most of the material back, but just swap off to a position where white's just got some big positional advantages. So knight takes c5, d takes c5, and knight c4. And the idea is bishop f1. We do something like bishop f1, and then we're in control again. We've got d6, we've got queen e4. This is just like total control. We've also got a weak e5 pawn to attack. But again, Torch had seen a lot further, because first of all, you're going to leave the bishop on this square. It can always take the rook later, but for the moment, it's putting the white king in danger. So e4 happens, which is a very nice move. The point is, bishop takes. I take on c4 here. So there's only one move, bishop e2, and this gives black the opportunity to play queen f4. And yeah, I mean, well, obviously it feels like there's a reasonable amount of danger here. Obviously queen g4 is covered by the bishop, but we do have the move bishop c7 hitting h2. And this is actually quite awkward here. So what could white do in this position? Well, Ruby went for queen d2, which was quite interesting, just trying to exchange off that advanced queen. There was also d6, which was more or less the only move that Stockfish and Dragon considered, and also, well, the move that I'd suggested they analyse, because, to be honest, I couldn't really see why he wouldn't do this. Yeah, once again, the moves get quite interesting here. We get bishop f1, bishop takes f1, queen covering here, and, well, good thing of the knight is stopping bishop b6. But now knight f6 comes in with knight g4. But I had actually thought, I'd seen this far to be honest, and I thought that queen d2 was going to be the move. Just like in the game actually, but in a slightly better situation. You've got rid of this bishop on h3, so you're just going to go queen f4, and you're a pawn up, and you've got a massive d-pawn, But yeah, black's got this move e3, which I confess I'd overlooked. The point is, if queen e3, then there's queen g4, forking king and rook. So, well, you end up taking with a knight on e3, and then we go knight e4, and, well, you've blocked this exchange, and now you're hitting the f2 pawn. Queen e2, and it's even more than that, because not only have you done that, by forcing knight takes e3, you've freed b6 for the bishop, and, well, look at that activity. My goodness, all of a sudden, everything, I don't know, just in a couple of moves, everything is just hitting f2 here. So white's best was to go d7, and this is quite nice. Knight takes f2, d8 queen. But black's got rook d8, bishop d8, queen f2. Looks like you're winning a piece, but then bishop b6 here. In actual fact, there is no way to avoid this pin on the knight, because after queen f4, we go gf4, and black's winning this one. And, well, after bishop takes a6, bishop e3 check, all of these endgames are drawn. The problem is that white's actually got the rung-coloured bishop for the rook's pawn. So, black simply has to swap off this bishop for these two pawns, which you can imagine is quite possible. And, well, then just head with a king to this corner, and it's just a draw. And, yeah, white can't just head over with the king to the corner to win the h-pawn, because, well, otherwise we'll just manage to get these B and C pawns on squares where they can't advance anymore. So yeah, that's quite amazing. But this E3 resource is key. It just shows that. But I mean, it's it's really one of those things. If you don't have that resource, then the whole thing is unsound. It's just amazing how deep these engines see, how deep you have to see, deep you have to see in order to be absolutely honest in saying that you saw everything and that you knew it was going to work. Obviously humans would have to do this intuitively, but yeah, it wouldn't be an easy judgment call, this one. So queen d2 was Ruby's move, just to swap off the queens, and now knight d6. The nice thing is that if you take on f4, I just take. So obviously knight d6, rook g8 check is not what you want. And if you go king h1, I go f3. This is the key, another key intermezzo. The bishop is trapped, and if you go knight d6, I just go fe and fork these two. And it gets even nicer, because after bishop, white can go bishop d3, with the idea of taking here, for example, maybe getting away with that. But you can actually play the move knight f7 here, because after bishop e4 I can go rook check. I can go knight g5. I think it was. I think this was the one. Was it? I should have checked this one before. Was it bishop g2 first and knight g5? One of the two, threatening the bishop and also threatening knight h3 check as well. So black's just going to win material here. So queen f4 isn't possible, but we got this little move queen d4. It's a very cunning little move. The point is that one of white's ideas is just to go queen e3 here. But with queen d4, Ruby's trying to sort of improve the position. If king g8, we go queen e3, and then black's no longer got rook g8 if ever the queens get exchanged. And if you go bishop f6, then, this bishop isn't so great on this diagonal. It's quite a long way away from here. I mean, it's also blocking the f-file as well. So then you go queen e3, and that's an improved version. And you're getting mixtures of wins and draws here. So, these moves definitely worsen black's position. But rook f6 was Torch's choice, and the best way of blocking. And you're not really stopping anything, because if the queen moves away to e3, then we can always move our rook to g6, and the bishop's still got access to this diagonal. So after knight d6, just for a moment, the glorious thought of bishop c7 flashed into my head. But actually I spotted quite quickly that knight f7 check is possible, stopping queen f6, and after king g8 we go d6, for example. So that's pretty sad. So queen d6 played by Torch, threatening bishop c7 now. Queen takes e4, bishop c7, and now f4. I did just for the hell of it. I liked the Petrosian-like queen h1. It's not losing in actual fact, but it's not that great. f4 is better, and then bishop f1, rook f4, takes, bishop takes. And now Ruby played king g2 here, but obviously bishop a6 is the move that you're kind of more interested in here. But it's this position, maybe even slightly surprisingly, with the 3 connected passed pawns, is also a draw here. So for example, this was game's Dragon against Stockfish. King g7, bishop d3, we go h5, king f6, bishop e2, king e5, c4, king d4. And the big problem is you just can't manage to get these pawns only on dark squares. Eventually those pawns are going to end up on light squares, and then we'll just be able to blockade them very, very easily. So for example, after b3, h4, b4, bishop d6, b5, king e3, king f1, king e4, then the engines were just thinking that this was a complete draw, because however the pawns go, you can blockade them with the king and the bishop, and you've always got some pass pawn possibilities on here if ever black is white strays too far afield. I think another idea, I think this was Dragon was doing this. Dragon was going g4 and then h4 simply claiming that even this position was completely fine for black. You didn't even need to have the g pawn either. Quite remarkable in actual fact. But it's one of those opposite coloured bishop things that it's sometimes you can blockade the pawns on the right colour square, and a huge material deficit doesn't make any difference. So Ruby didn't even take the pawn. Ruby played king g2, a5 from Torch, king f3, king g7, h3, king f6, king e4, king e7, and obviously if 3 pawns aren't going to win, then 2 are unlikely to as well. And simply Ruby just cannot force the pawn through to c5. After c4 we go king d6, and if we went king d4 I'd just have bishop e5 check. So bishop d1, h5, bishop h5, a4, just give away the pawn. Bishop c1 from Torch, just ensuring that 1 pawn disappears. And after here, it's a pretty clear draw. I think Ruby played on for about 18 moves or something like that, but eventually it was drawn. I mean, that was quite an amazing game. I'm sure you'll agree there. yeah, I mean, interesting opening tussle, and I loved Ruby's reaction to G5. Just G4 there. But I mean, absolutely honestly, I mean, I did not guess a single one of Torch's moves after this all happened. This idea, knight F6 and knight E8, just retreat a knight from a great square on E8 back on E4 back to E8, and then sacrifice the exchange, in a way that's been completely forbidden. And then, these tactics with all these pieces hanging, that this somehow works. And of course, the justification, this E4 move and Queen F4, with the idea that actually White isn't even capable of exchanging off this queen, which you would have thought would really be, possible, and also good for White considering he's up in material. The fact that that can't happen, and of course also this little tactic with E3, that allows this enormous a concentration of forces against the F2 pawn. I mean, there are just some amazing things that took place there. And when you consider, I mean, this is at a 10 minute plus 3 seconds time control, just unbelievable what's happening. I mean, great play from Ruby, but super play from Torch as well to, to keep it all together there. So there we are. I hope you're enjoying this. Yeah, I mean, we're into the I think it's the rapid semi-finals. Going to get two qualifiers for the final match. Lilo had started brilliantly, but just lost a game pair against Berserk. Berserk wasn't doing so well up till now. So I think, yeah, Lila's still ahead, but Stockfish close behind, and Torch very close by as well. So, well, I mean, there's I think it's 480 games in this semi-final, so plenty of time still to go, but going to be interesting to see. I get the feeling that the gap between Torch and Lila looks, yeah, very, very small at this time control. Whereas I think Torch was looking somewhat better at the Blitz and Bullet time controls. Not a great difference at all, but just a little gap, I think. So yeah, really going to be interesting here to see what pans out and which engines qualify for the final. But anyway, hope you're enjoying these games. Hope you're enjoying my looks at both chess.com and the TCC. Yeah, I think I've got a grip now of the chess.com. I'm slightly less panicked about missing good games and just concentrating on the ones that I do see. But thanks, Max, as well, for all your suggestions of games. I will definitely have a look at all of them. It's just, yeah, I'm work full time, and then just in the evening I try and look at some games, analyse them, get them on my engine, so and then do some videos as well. So I'm not exactly the quickest to get through all this stuff, but I'm doing my best. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. Give a like, subscribe, take a look at my books if you've got a moment, and otherwise keep on watching and stay tuned for lots more engine videos.